Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on what time you're watching this. My name's Connor from 905 Review. You guys are checking out our series, Give This a Spin, where I recommend you some of my favorite albums. Today we're looking at a wildly significant release, being DJ Shadow's solo debut from 1996, Endtroducing. DJ Shadow began recording and mixing as early as high school in his hometown of Davis, California, where he would soon after work for a college radio station at UC Davis. Regarding his own work, he had a focus on hip-hop, but with a tendency to dive through old used record bins, he would create this audio library for himself spanning multiple genres that he would freely cut and sample stuff from at will, which, if you think about it, was significantly harder to do 30 years ago than it would be with today's advanced technology. With that being said, he was dubbed a trip-hop artist, a genre that was pretty new at the time and even more so in the United States, having originated in England. Now, trip-hop was essentially rap beats but with other influences involved, whether that be funk or jazz, and oftentimes was devoid of actually having any rapping on it. In the case of artists like Portishead, this was instead replaced by beautiful female vocals, or in Shadow's case, oftentimes he relied on dialogue samples. He generally avoided having lyrics because, even though a lot of times they're still open to interpretation, he felt that it would still confine the listener to a smaller box than pure instrumentals might. Through the early 90s, Shadow was making a reputation for himself, having worked on a project that also included the group Organized Confusion, as well as starting up a label alongside Black Alicious. By 1995, he had a handful of singles out, and so in 96, it was time for an album. And he starts it off on a good note, putting his best foot forward. After an intro, we get a chill, spacey jam, but in no time this is interrupted by some scratching to introduce Shadow, prompting some more scratching in between samples. After this, we're left with a sample of Mike D of the Beastie Boys saying, "You're just fessin', man, I don't even want to hear about it," as if Shadow is painting this picture of somebody who's not a fan of him or not familiar with him, kind of not believing the hype, undermining him a little bit, prompting a bit of a challenge, if you will. And he takes that challenge to heart because after this we have arguably the best song on the album, Building Steam with a Grain of Salt. Taking the piano from the appropriately titled Jeremy Storch song, I Feel a New Shadow, DJ Shadow creates this loop with it that actually evokes this pretty emotional mood. And then layering on top of that, interview from George March about learning how to play the drums and produce just from listening to music. The second this monologue ends, a monster bass drum comes in as part of a kick-ass drum beat, which was pretty brilliant given the context he made here.
I'm a student of the drums, and I'm also a teacher of the drums too.
Shortly after, a beautiful choir joins in the background, and if I'm being honest, this song is nothing short of a production masterpiece. He lets us roll for a while, occasionally changing it up with other samples, such as a snippet from Mort Garson's Zodiac series. At the halfway point, he's just having fun messing around, splicing up the drums, before killing things down with a funky, soulful HP Riot guitar sample. Following this song, to conclude the first disc's first side, is the Number song, which, as you might be able to guess, starts by counting off before kicking into this jam. And be it Shadow's prowess or maybe even my own ineptitude, I somehow never noticed the sample of Metallica's Orion playing throughout this song, layered under some funky drums. About halfway through, we change away from being borderline breakbeat into something more soulful, utilizing some open percussive sounds, before eventually coming back into the song's original sound. Opening the second side on a much more relaxing note is Changeling, with the dreamy keys coming from the Chaffee College Jazz Ensemble, before in typical Endtroducing style, some big banging drums join in. And this creates such an interesting mood because the keys keep things so peaceful, and yet at the same time, the drums at the very least make you want to bob your head. He'll occasionally throw some other cuts in to keep you invested, the saxophone and guitar samples doing a great job at this. This closes out with transmission 1 being some chatter over some mechanical whirring before some ambient sound takes over. This, however, prompts some dialogue from the 1987 horror Prince of Darkness, where in a dream sequence we're told that we're not actually dreaming. Our brain is being used as a telecommunication device to receive a message from the distant future, the far-off year of 19, and just like that we're cut off by some lush strings to start the album's 6th track and one of its singles, Stem, those strings coming from Nirvana. No, not that Nirvana, the 60s one. It feels kind of moody, but these occasional big drum hits almost make it unnerving, despite the pretty chimes being played at the same time. The tension continues to build, eventually turning into some real breakbeat with its frantic drums. After a couple short spoken words are spliced together, we're back into the song's original sound, and this time with a soulful cello to boot. Though before long, he gets back into the breakbeat section, though eventually the two styles coincide. This concludes, ending the song Stem, though the track continues as Long Stem begins with a Giorgio Moroder synthesizer loop where the chimes and the strings from Stem return. On top of this, we're given a long monologue from stand-up comedian Murray Roman, though the way it's presented with the music, it feels like more of a drama in this setting. And some continuous ambience will see us out of this great track. The second record begins with some deep, chill, wavy synths acting as a second transmission, and the lonely piano that takes over really makes you feel like you're on your own in a wide open sea. Short, brief, precise, and beautiful. But like the first transmission, we are receiving the same message again this time, only we inch a little bit closer, as we're told it's from the far-off year of 199, only to again be cut off by some wild whirring sound that eventually calms down into this funky percussive beat, both coming from Swedish artist Pew Rojfeldt, kicking off the next track, Mutual Slump. This eventually dies out, and when it does, we are instantly in a different mood, as all we're left with are the very dreamy keys from Bjork's Possibly Maybe, and eventually we hear audio from an interview DJ Shadow conducts with his wife about her move to the US from Japan as a child. After this, we get back into the song's original sound, where the drums continue to romp, though we will occasionally cut in and out between the two, this starting one and the one with the interview with his wife.
Never had a cat before.
This is followed by the next track, Organ Donor, as the Moroder loop from Long Stem returns. Slap some fat drums on that, and you got yourself a beat. There's a break roughly halfway through where the keys go crazy doing their own thing, and when the drums come back in with it, the song is going in full force, though there's only 20 seconds left at that point. That's why the remixed version on the 1998 compilation Preemptive Strike I would recommend over this, just because it does get the full song treatment spanning 4.5 minutes. And Shadow's got some issues to take up on the next track, Why Hip Hop Sucks in 96. We start off with this real cool synth and bass line, both coming from Cleo McNett, though in the context of this album, I suppose we're supposed to be thinking about West Coast hip hop. Given the track's title, its short length, and the fact that the only dialogue is Gift of Gab saying, "It's the money," and later, "'Tis fact," the song is essentially just a punchline, but a damn funky one at that. This does, however, set up the album side to close with Midnight in a Perfect World, utilizing some of those same samples from Transmission 2, only getting a full song's treatment, and a beautiful one at that. With all its keys, ambience, and vocal work, it is so absolutely dreamlike, despite the big banging drums. And the song's incredible because really it's hard to pick what mood is conveyed here. It almost depends on what kind of day you're having. This could feel pretty, down and maybe a little pessimistic, but other times if you're just having a nice peaceful drive at night, this could, fit right in with that. Opening the final album side is Napalm Brain, Scatterbrain, though where one song ends and the other begins isn't abundantly clear. The song begins with an interesting sample from the 1986 film The Aurora Encounter, in which we have a drunken man conversing with an alien that's paid him a visit. That aside, we get a real cool drum and bass combo going for us here. And this has quickly made its way up as one of my favorites from Endtroducing. Later, a distorted, funky guitar joins in, only adding to the vibe, as other samples will continue to find their way into the mix. Soon this all dies out, we're left with some rattling hi-hats and the occasional other percussion, as we steer again towards a breakbeat sound. And so it's my estimate that at this point, we go from Napalm Brain to Scatterbrain. And here we get a pretty neat mood set, especially once the strings join in. Eventually, once the song dies down, those are all that remain, alongside a lone acoustic guitar. Nearing our end now, we have What Does Your Soul Look Like? Part 1, Blue Sky Revisit. We have a nice mood set out with some spacey keys, some sultry saxophone, but of course, the big drums have to join in. As this goes on, we have a few different vocal samples tossed in, and the recurring theme among them seems to be fixating too much on the past instead of focusing on what we can do and what might come in the future. And closing with Transmission 3, we finally get the full message, finding that it's 1999, the year the message is being sent from. Ominously, this is followed up by a snippet from the surreal drama Twin Peaks, in which a character is warned that it is happening again. Now, the context within the show was that a possessed antagonist was about to kill again, so I don't exactly know what Shadow had in mind using it, but I'm not gonna lie, once everything cuts into abrupt silence after that, it is really a little bit chilling. Now, you might have noticed we had What Does Your Soul Look Like Part 1 and no other parts of it, and that's because for the vinyl versions of the album, Shadow had to shave off some time, so What Does Your Soul Look Like Part 4 got the axe, and honestly, that was a criminal thing to do. You've got this funky, fresh bass line over some organs with a side of jazzy drums, add in some lustful saxophone, and you've got yourself an A+ song. While only Part 1 made the vinyl, Parts 1 and 4 made it on the CD, and all 4 parts are on the aforementioned compilation Preemptive Strike. There was also an untitled half-minute segment cut from the CD regarding the vinyl release, It was just a funky little piece, but I really can't tell the source of the dialogue over top. The 2005 deluxe edition came on 2 CDs, the second one entitled Excessive Ephemera, containing alternate mixes of some songs, remixes by other artists, a couple new tracks, as well as a 12-minute live set. The real deal was the 2016 Endtroducing 20th Anniversary Introspective Edition, featuring the album Excessive Ephemera and Endtroducing Reimagined, in which every track got a remix by a different artist, Clams Casino, Prince Paul, Hudson Mohawk among them, across 6 180-gram vinyls in a box set or a triple CD set. In 2019, the album was released on a blue vinyl, and in 2021, for its 25th anniversary, it was remastered at Abbey Road Studio, limited to only 140 signed copies. The album was popular and well received in the UK, perhaps expected because of the growing trip-hop scene, and yet it hardly made a sound in Shadow's own hometown. But over time, everybody's warmed up to it. Now, was it really that mind-blowing? Of course it was, because all that Shadow and his peer Dan the Automator used were a drum sampling machine, a set of turntables, and the software Pro Tools. How is that even possible? Because this was the first album ever made entirely out of samples. I mean, how insane is that? I'm sure we've all heard those people who aren't invested in music being like, oh, well, how hard can DJing be? All you do is press the play button, right? But Shadow shows you like what an entirely different stratosphere DJing can go into. And on top of that, he's able to preserve the heart and soul of these sometimes only 5-second long samples while simultaneously creating something entirely new out of it. As such, it has rightly been discussed as one of the greatest albums ever made, and significantly more so for instrumental hip-hop and plunderphonics, being a genre reliant on using multiple samples to turn into something completely new, such as Shadow does here. So it's nothing short of a historic album, being incredibly innovative, creative, and unique. And the sheer samples here are ridiculous, from Bjork to Metallica to stuff you've probably never ever heard of, nor would you have if not for this album. And with that being said, the website Who Sampled was my best friend for doing this write-up. On top of that, the drums here go absolutely crazy, and I usually don't care much for skits, but the whole idea between the transmissions, slowly unveiling a little bit more every time, was honestly pretty awesome. Due to the album's legacy, even its simplistic, titleless cover has gone on to be iconic. It's just a snapshot frozen in time. Chief XL and Lyrics Born digging through crates for things to sample. Also has a little Easter egg for you. I feel like everybody thinks he's got a beanie on, but really it's a wig. With all that being said, I'm going to be stamping DJ Shadow's Endtroducing with an A grading. It's a hell of an album, but it's more than that. It's an accomplishment. It's truly an artistic feat. And the legitimate full songs on here, so many of them are killer. I mean, every time you listen to this album, the first couple times anyways, you might have a new one grabbing your attention. And as great as the music sounded on vinyl, I almost want to urge you more to get the CD just for What Does Your Soul Look Like Part 4. It is that good. Those have been my thoughts on DJ Shadow's Endtroducing. Let me know yours down below. As always, I appreciate you coming here, tuning in, listening to some tunes with me. Maybe we'll do it again sometime. You take care now. But real quick before we take off, I want to hear your thoughts on DJ Shadow's Endtroducing. Did I rate it too high? Did I rate it too low? You let me know down below, as well as any other thoughts, comments, recommendations you might have. As always, hosting you's been a blessing, and hopefully I'll host you again sometime soon. All right, see ya.